fun. All right, Dusty, you're on. Sally's on. Everybody's on.
We're on. I'm on. Is Dusty, you on?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay.
Thanks, Nate. Can you enable my share screen?
Yep.
Share screen, please.
There you go. You should be able to now.
All right. All right. Well, welcome everyone to the 2020-2021 NMAA Football Rules Clinic. My name is Dusty Young. I am the Associate Director for the New Mexico Activities Association and also the Director of Football. I'm sure I'm not alone in feeling this way, but I am very excited to be here tonight. Holding a football rules clinic means we are finally preparing for a football season. So I know it's been a very long and difficult year for all of us, but there is light at the end of the tunnel, and we will have football games scheduled to be played all across New Mexico here within the next few weeks. So first things first, I really do want to say thank you to all of our football coaches. Again, it's been a very, very trying year for all of us, but especially for our student athletes. And whether it's been workouts in small pods or just words of encouragement, you've been really the driving force in keeping our kids engaged and active and hopeful as we try to start our sports seasons this year. I would also like to say thank you to the many coaches that reached out to myself and to Sally Marquez, our executive director, with insight and feedback on how to not only successfully get back into high school sports, but also run a successful football season under very unique circumstances. So much appreciated. And also with that, I can tell you that anytime I had a conversation with a football coach, there were also words of encouragement and gratitude and, thanks given to the NMAA staff. And that really goes a long way. It's been a trying year for us too, but knowing that we have the support of our coaches and our schools, that makes things just a little bit easier as we try to navigate this difficult situation. And before we dive into the rules clinic itself, as I mentioned earlier, we're not operating in normal conditions. Things are not going to be ideal this year. Sally's been saying that quite a bit in her Q&As over the last few weeks and even months. We'll go over a number of rules and regulations today that are not optimal. But please remember that it's these rules and regulations that are allowing us to finally get our kids back out there on the football field. It's not about the blue trophy. It's not about a full 10-game football season. It's not about wearing masks or not wearing masks or wearing a certain type of mask while we're playing the game. It's about participation. And we're finally there. Our kids can finally get back out there. It's going to go such a long way with their social, emotional well-being to just get out there, play football, the game that they love, that they've been dying to play for the last year. So with that, I will turn it over at this time to our executive director, Ms. Sally Marquez.
Good evening. Thanks, guys. Wow, it's just weird seeing your pictures to sit up there. But anyway, it's been a trying year. Dusty has said quite a bit. And first and foremost, I want to thank you. Dusty just thanked you. I want to thank you guys for hanging in there. There's many of you that I have talked to individually to ask your opinion. And there's one thing that I think that we have come out of this is that we're all in this together and we're all ready for our kids to get back on the playing field. And we're all doing this, and all the heartache, all the doubt, all the frustration, all of that is because of kids. And I just want to say thank you because you guys have your priorities where it should be. I'm here to tell you that every single day, there's something that changes. And I've told our athletic directors over and over is just wait till the next day, something's going to happen. Just be patient, just slow down. We have to take this day by day. And Dusty's going to go over a lot of the COVID changes that we're going to have on the football field. But there is one thing that I want to talk to you about that came down yesterday. You probably already heard this from your athletic director, but I did receive a document which I knew was coming from the governor's office. And I had already seen that document last week. And that was the one document that we actually had everything in that document going forward correctly. Except the one thing that on that document that I am still trying to fight is the fans in the stands. But at this point, within that document that came yesterday, came another document from the Public Education Department, which the document from the Public Education Department is actually coming from the governor's office as well. So this document came to us, and there was one area that is a huge change that is going to affect football. I reached out to a few of you today. Dusty and I are still trying to work through this and with the athletic directors and figure out how we're going to make this work. But I'm going to tell you the change, and it's not favorable, but we can always make anything happen. So first and foremost, it's question number 10 that came from the PED. There was a Q&A, and you're going to see this document is now on our website and how we've changed it and put it in our guidance. But there was a question number 10, and the question number 10 says that our schools needed to stay in pods for workouts through the 14-day acclimation period. So for example, for those that began hybrid on February 8th, there's not going to be any change whatsoever. That's not going to have anything to do with you. If you started hybrid on February 15th, or you plan to start on February 22nd, that 14-day period that we were going to work and open that up for practices, now they must be practices within pods during that 14-day period. So for the sport of football, we have some problems because it is going to be very difficult for that 14 days. We're not going to be able to play a game after those 14 days. I am working right now. I have sent up some clarification to the governor's office. I have asked for an opening of the pods to 11 to 1. I have also asked if we had to stay in pods, can we have contact within our pods? I have not received answers to those questions as of tonight. So this just came in last night. This morning is when I was able to communicate that with the governor's office, that my concern. And this afternoon is when I told our athletic directors that hadn't seen that document. So we are trying to figure out what that is going to mean for football. Does that mean we only have 4 games now instead of 5? And we do not know that answer just yet. For some of you, like I said, if you started on February 8th, it's not going to be a problem. You're going to be able to start on March 6th and play. For those that are coming in later, it's really one more week that you're going to have to probably wait before competition is going to happen. And so I am working through this at this time, but I wanted to be the first one to tell you I have communicated to you guys from day one. And I know this is a shock to a lot of you, but it was a shock to Dusty and I as well. So any questions or comments on that?
Sally, are we looking at the back to kind of that original possibility for those of us who might not be able to start until March 8th? I guess twofold. Are we looking at shrinking, because we'll be in pads for so long, potentially shrinking that window of not having to wait 2 more weeks before we play, and then also the idea of kind of playing those midweek games, like to be able to maybe get them all in that time frame, maybe a 5-day break in between, as long as it's not on Sundays.
Correct, and that's what we're working at right now. I'm waiting on the answer from the governor's office, but yes, Mark, but we thought that the worst case scenario would be 1 more week max. We wouldn't do another 2 weeks after that, because you've been in helmets, you've been in shells. That's why I'm hoping that we can have contact within the pods, because that would even speed up the process as well. So it would just give you guys a time to get it with 11 people, a normal practice before you get out there. So we are working at that right now with the governor's office, and that's my hope. And for some people, it may mean play on a Monday and then play on a Saturday, so we can get 2 games in during that time frame. So that's what we are looking at, and we are trying to maximize as much as we can. I will tell you, it's very disappointing, but I am to a point, and I think you guys are to a point. We are right there. They can put barriers in front of us and keep putting barriers in front of us, but we just have to get over those barriers, and we have to find a way to make this work. And that's what I'm trying to tell you right now is Dusty and I are going to work hard to make sure we can make this work, because we got to get those kids on the football field. And if that's 4 games, it's 4 games. If it's 5 games, it's 5 games. If there's no bowl thing at the end, that means that's fine. We're still playing 4 football games when we didn't even think we'd get to play. So that right now is my mindset is, you know what? Okay, you gave us this, we're still going to play. And so this just happened today, last night and today. So we will get back with you next week, as I've always communicated with you, how we're going to make this work. But yes, Mark, it will not be another 2 weeks. We're going to figure this out. Any other questions? All righty, I'm going to turn this back over to Dusty, and he's got I'll be on, and he will give you the COVID guidelines just in case there's any other questions, but I will be on. And in the chat, yes, there will be sub-varsity. This is for all levels, but Dusty, take it away, and we will continue to answer questions. But once again, guys, thank you. Let's do this. That's all I can say is let's do this, and we can. So here you go, Dusty. That's all yours.
Thank you, Sally. And moving forward, obviously, if you do have questions, put those in the chat. If you can, try and keep your questions related to the slide or the information that we are talking about at that time. That way we can go over each detail one by one and not kind of go on different tangents throughout the presentation. First off, just listing some important dates. Monday, February 22nd, that is, of course, the first official day of practice. Thursday, March 4th, competitions may begin, and then the last day of competition will be Saturday, April 3rd. But as Sally mentioned, these dates may be different on a school-by-school basis, and that's obviously dependent on when schools return to hybrid learning. And again, this is something that just came to us last night, so we will adjust on the fly and try and make things as best we can for everyone's football schedule. But it may be a little different for each school depending upon when you guys can get back in that hybrid learning. As Sally mentioned, with regards to our season format, the regular season is really 4 weeks of games the way we look at it. If we go with the traditional calendar that we implemented and that I just talked about, obviously it's not going to look exactly like that because of those certain unique hybrid situations. But there are 4 weeks for what we would call our regular season. Those games must be played within your region, or if it's not within your region, at a neutral site. We will create the varsity schedule as we've talked about over the last few weeks. I've had a lot of questions the last couple of days. What's my schedule going to look like? Can you give me an idea? We are going to try to, of course, put you against your traditional district opponents in your classification. However, dependent on who is actually playing, if schools drop, we may have to adjust that slightly, put you up against a school that's a class up or down. But the biggest thing is we're trying to put you within your region. That's been something that the governor's office and the PED has been very strict about, is that if we are going to move forward with the season in all sports, we need to limit travel as much as possible. What we are designating as the postseason, and again, we don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but that is the last week of the season. So that's the week ending April 3rd. The format still to be determined. We've talked about having some sort of bowl game format where you're playing a school within your region, possibly having a 1 versus 2 matchup for a potential state championship. We do need approval from the state before we can move forward with something like that, though. I think the gist of what we're looking at, though, for the season format is potentially getting 5 games in for our member schools. How we do that, we may have to be creative, just depending upon when schools can actually start with practices and actual competition. But more information should be available within the next few days. I know Sally and I will plan to work on the actual schedules over the next few days in hopes that we can get that out to you guys early next week.
And Dusty, there's a few questions in the chat. A couple of them are officials related, and I know we're planning an officials Q&A probably next week, but if we have the answers to these, if we can try to field them. So this is, how can we volunteer for practices? And Sally, I know this is something that you and I spoke about earlier today. I don't know if you want to address that as far as officials at practices.
I think, Dana, we were able to do it for some of the other sports. Let us just look to see the new format and what schools. There are some schools that we would be able to have officials there to just try, that have been in hybrid for a long time, and there's others that won't. So let me get back on that one to see how we can make that work.
And officials, just be on the lookout. We're going to send out some information about that Q&A, so be on the lookout for that and make sure you attend if you can. Another officials question, which I don't know if we have the answer yet, will crews travel together or separately? And I believe that's probably something else we'll have for the officials Q&A. And then from Coach Gary Bradley, how many miles is a region?
And Coach, on that one, we're working with the athletic directors with football because it's an outdoor sport. When Dusty and I are scheduling, trying to figure this out, there might be some teams that may be playing at a neutral site. For example, if I need to, and this is just an example, let's say a Las Cruces school needs to play somebody in the southeast, we can meet at Rio Doso and play, because Rio Doso is basically in both regions. So there are ways that we can make that work, but the idea is that it is not long bus rides. You should not be on a bus for more than a couple hours at max. So we will figure that out, though.
Cuando quieres cerrar, yo creo que pones start clip otra vez.
And that's all in the chat, Dusty.
Thank you. Okay, now we will get into some of our COVID-19 specific guidelines. First and foremost, I do want to mention that we of course are working under the guidelines set forth by the Public Education Department and their school reentry guidelines. I have put the link to that in this slide, but we will email this out to ADs and coaches as well. It is also available on our website. There are a number of things that are more administrative that we won't dive into tonight, but you'll need to work with your athletic directors on. I know I've had phone calls on, what happens if there's a COVID exposure within my JV and not my varsity. Those are things that you'll need to work with your administration on, and the PED and the Department of Health. But some of those reentry guidelines are available through the website or the web link that is on this slide that we will also email out to everyone. In addition to that, we have very specific return to participation guidelines that just went out this afternoon to our athletic directors. I'll make sure I get that out to coaches as well. There are plenty of general guidelines to remember as you're working through this year, not just football, but all sports. So again, those are things that you'll need to work with your school administration on. And then also, if you have any of your own specific school or school district guidelines, keep those in mind as we move forward with the upcoming season. Moving forward with some of the general guidelines for football this year, first and foremost, social distancing and face coverings. Those are things that have to happen really at all times, not just during games and whatnot, but throughout the process and pregame warmups, at halftime, after the game. Social distancing is extremely important. That 6 feet of social distancing. Obviously, the only time that you're not worrying about that is when you're actively engaged in competition. Face coverings required at all times, no matter where you are, what type of, or what period or halftime or pregame, postgame. Face coverings always have to be worn by everyone that's involved with the competition. That's players, coaches, officials, event staff, anyone that's involved does have to wear a face covering at all times. And as Sally mentioned, currently, per the governor's order, spectators are not permitted for our fall sports seasons. Sally's been fighting that for quite a while, and I know she'll continue to advocate for your communities to get that changed, but at this time, spectators are not allowed. Physicals for our athletes, as I'm sure you remember from the fall, our board of directors did make a decision that athletes could use their physical from the 2019-2020 school year. However, they would have to be cleared through a waiver that was put together by our office. If they hit certain check boxes on that waiver, they had to go through a new physical. And then of course, all your new athletes have to go through a new physical as well. But for those who cleared that waiver, the 2019-2020 physical can still be used for this current season. One new piece of information that has come out from our office, a lot of schools reached out and said, how do we handle a situation where a student had his physical, everything was cleared in the fall, but they have since been tested and were positive for COVID-19. If you have an athlete that's been in that situation, we do have a new clearance form that they will have to fill out, and they will have to go through the necessary steps on that clearance form, which will be to get in touch with a medical provider to get clearance to participate in the upcoming season. That information is available within our return to play guidelines, and also available, your AD should have that soon if they don't have that already as well. In addition to that, our Sports Medicine Advisory Committee put together some recommendations for the return to activity for athletes that have had COVID-19. This is information that the medical field has put together, just recommendations for folks. Obviously, they haven't had a whole lot of working out or conditioning over the last 11 months. Plus, if they've had this disease that we don't know a lot about, we do want to ease them back into competition. So there are some recommendations on how to make that happen for your athletes. Dana, any questions on that?
There's a comment, not a question. It just says federal guidelines for return to work are 10 days after cessation of symptoms.
And that is correct. It's 10 days, but the governor has 14. So the CDC says 10 per the pediatrics, but we have to follow the governor's with 14.
And that was everything in the chat, Dusty.
Thank you.
Oh, just kidding. They just popped back up. I'm sorry. And the answer to this is yes, but do players have to wear masks while playing?
Yes, face coverings are required at all times. And we do have a specific slide where I'll go over a little bit more information on the face coverings.
And will officials need a test?
A COVID test?
Yes.
No, that's not a requirement for our officials.
And then another comment on the days of return to work. It's 10 days after the onset of symptoms and 24 hours after cessation of fever.
Dana, is that for officials, the question, or is that for athletes?
For which, I'm sorry?
You made a comment. Guys, as far as your athletes and your team and coaches, that will be done by the school, and the school will give you guidance through the DOH. So that's not us making those determinations.
And it was a comment from an official based on that other comment. And then a question from Coach Castile. Does anyone have a good idea for masks and mouthpieces? Is there one type that works well? And coaches, if you do have any samples for players for masks and mouthpieces, if you'll put those in the chat for Coach Castile. And Shane, I believe you're talking about officials. And that's it.
All right, thank you, Dita. Moving on, so locker rooms. The way our guidelines currently read is that if you can, if possible, athletes should come to their various contests or practice already dressed and ready to go. However, we know football is very unique and that locker rooms are a big part of preparation for our various competitions. We have been given approval to have limited access to locker rooms. That's both for our home teams and visiting teams. Here are some of the guidelines that we have in place within our return to play documents. Of course, just as with all facilities right now, to make sure that those locker rooms are sanitized before and after use. There are no use of the showers within the locker room. You do need to limit the students and any other individuals that are within that locker room, meaning staggering entry and exit. Shouldn't have any congregating within the locker room. Have them come in, get dressed. As soon as they're dressed, get out. Same thing as always, social distancing and face coverings. Those are requirements. So spreading those individuals apart while they're getting ready. And also they do need to be wearing those face coverings at all times.
And there is a question in the chat. Any thought to doing extended half times with us trying to limit entry into locker rooms and access to the athletes during that time?
And yes, that is something that can be done. The NFHS has come up with some rule modifications. One of those being to extend, time after first period, halftime. Just make sure that schools work with the officials to establish what exactly they're looking at to return from halftime. The one thing to remember, and this kind of leads into the next topic, we will have some limits on team personnel this year. So we won't be able to have, our JV, we won't be able to have 100 people on a sideline for certain games for our larger schools. So hopefully that will help with the amount of time needed at halftime within the locker room. And honestly, for our schools, if there is no need to go into the locker room, the recommendation may be just to stay on the field. I know weather and other circumstances may not allow for that, but based on our rules and regulations regarding locker rooms, you can't have the full team in there anyway at halftime to go over game plan or what happened in the first half or adjustments for the second half.
And a couple of more questions have come in. How about locker rooms for officials?
Same things, locker rooms will be available to officials, if the school district has that available and whatnot, but we would ask the same exact requirements as I already mentioned for the team. Sanitization, no use of the showers, limiting the individuals in that locker room. I know crews are smaller, but just making sure there's no guests or other folks that are coming in and out of that locker room. And then also social distancing and face coverings for the officials as well.
If an official has reason to believe a player has no mouthpiece, can we ask them to lift the mask to verify?
Yes, it's a requirement that athletes participate with a mouthpiece. So yes, and that's something. One thing I do want to pass on with that. We're not asking our officials to look for this, to check every single player, every single play. As coaches, it's your responsibility to make sure that all of your players are legally equipped. And that's something that our officials need to keep in the back of their mind as well. But definitely, if you suspect that someone may not have that mouth guard, that is a safety rule, and that's why they have to wear it. So please do let them know that they need to have that to move forward in competition.
And can disposable masks be worn?
So we'll get to masks here in a second.
Okay, and then A comment from an official who's a baseball umpire, just get dressed out of your trunk because that's what baseball officials do. And then let's see, the amount of kids in the locker room at halftime is up to the district.
No, so that just needs to be limited. And Sally, I don't believe we have a specific capacity as of yet.
That is up to that would be up to the host school. So the host school, you need to communicate with each other. Athletic directors need to communicate with athletic directors and coaches to coaches, because every school is going to be different as to how a locker room is going to proceed with in and out and the small groups. So make sure you communicate with your other team as to how that's going to work.
And then the last question in the chat, officials come dressed, correct? And from our standpoint, I would recommend that officials come dressed just in case there is an issue with the locker room that maybe you might not be aware of. So we've told other sports that that would probably be the best thing to do. So that would be my recommendation to officials. And then let's see, will there be any penalties for not following COVID requirements? For example, if a player takes off the mask.
So a player should not be participating without a mask. So if an official noticed that, they should be, just as with any other equipment issue, send them off. They cannot participate without a mask. Obviously, during the course of a game, there may be times where that mask moves around or slightly comes off, and we just ask that those players put that back on before competing in the next play.
And then there's a question from Coach Howell for officials. What would be a reason to believe a player isn't wearing a mouthpiece? So, Antonio, I believe you had asked that question. Do you want to give a reason to believe?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sometimes you hear a quarterback and it's not muffled at all. So the quarterback possibly doesn't have a mouthpiece in, or and just any reason to believe that you know what, if we have a valid reason to ask, because a lot of times we see it with quarterbacks that they don't put it in or they don't have one in, and you can actually hear them really clear. That would let you know that there's not anything muffling.
Thank you, Antonio. And that's all for the questions, Dusty, at this time.
Thank you. Okay, moving on, sideline personnel. So teams are limited to 60 individuals on the sideline, and I will get into the details on that here within the next couple slides. But also with regards to sideline personnel, additional access should be limited to officials, media, and essential staff only. So that's one key point that we need to stress with our schools, is the playing service has to be limited, just like the facility in general. In order to move forward with the season, we have to limit the access to those that are essential to the contest itself. Now moving on to some of the modifications that the NFHS has put together for this unique football season. For the coin toss, and this obviously applies, this will be for officials and for coaches and teams as well. One captain from each team, that's it. Should be handled at the 50-yard line, midfield, just as always. Only the referee and the umpire should take part in the coin toss. Make sure that social distancing is taking place during the coin toss, and also no handshakes before or after. And that obviously would be the same for the pregame coin toss, and then if you happen to go into overtime as well. The ball should be cleaned and sanitized throughout the contest, just as we have done throughout our workouts since we started in the fall. And we do have in our return to play guidelines, I know you folks have already probably figured this out, the best way to handle it for each program, but Wilson, our official ball, they do have some sanitation instructions available. Those are within our return to play documents. And here we go, getting into face coverings. Face coverings are required at all times by all individuals, whether it's coaches, players, officials. Those face coverings need to attach or tie to the back of the head or loop around the ears. I've had a ton of questions on this from coaches over the last few weeks about a particular mask that attaches to the face mask only. That cannot be used. That would not fulfill the requirements set forth with the PED and our guidelines regarding a face covering. So again, it has to attach or tie to the back of the head or loop around the ears. Also, some questions have come in about this as well in recent days. It cannot be a mask with that slit in the middle that allows for someone to, say, take a drink through that slit. It has to be a full face covering. Neck gaiters are also not allowed. That is a safety rule that was implemented by the NFHS. It was their sports medicine advisory committee's feeling that if that was grabbed from behind, that it could cause a potentially severe neck or head injury. So neck gaiters are not allowed. Plastic shields can be integrated directly into the helmet. I'm sure some of you have seen that product out there. Those are allowed as long as there's no tint. However, regardless if you have that shield or not, you still have to wear a face covering under that shield as well. For the face covering itself, there are no restrictions on color. And then lastly, as we spoke about, tooth and mouth protectors, those are required at all times, worn under the face covering. And one thing that we also stress, if an athlete is on the sideline and they're taking that in and out, we will need to have hand sanitizer available so that they can use that prior to getting back into competition.
All right, Dusty, there's a slew of questions, so I'll go through these. Will officials' mentors be allowed on the sideline?
Dina, I think that's probably something more for the Q&A with
Okay.
officials that we can talk about.
And probably this next one as well, will temperatures be taken for officials upon entry to games? Will that be also?
Sally, do you want to refresh my memory on the officials and temperature checks and screening and whatnot and how we're handling that?
You know, we'd have to go back. At this point, the temperature checks for officials, that they were supposed to do temperature checks prior to getting in the car. There are some schools that want to do the temperature checks when they get there. So I think it's going to be by case basis, but we are not mandating the temperature checks for the officials. They shouldn't be monitoring themselves.
And officials, if you do get to a school and they want to take your temperature, just let them. It's you know, it's not that big of a deal. So Dusty, who will be responsible for cleaning the balls, and can we utilize at least 3 balls per team?
So it's team personnel. Team personnel is responsible for the sanitization of your footballs. We will be flexible. Obviously, the NFHS has certain guidelines in place for when and when you cannot bring in a new ball. So prior to the start of the game, you're supposed to show the officials what legal balls you have available for the game. We will be a little bit more flexible, just like when we have inclement weather, as far as when you can bring new balls in and out. So yes, the answer to that would be let's be a little bit more flexible with how many footballs are used, as long as they're legal and approved prior to the start of the game.
And then will there be a ball boy, one or none?
That will be up to each individual host school to determine that.
And then this one, I can take face shields by officials. The answer to that for contact sports, for a previous discussion between Sally and I, would be no. There's just too much potential for injury with a face shield. So rather than face shields, just a mask. Can coaches wear neck gaiters?
The answer to that is no. Neck gaiters, per the governor's orders, are not masks. So we have to follow the governor's public health orders on neck gaiters.
Can they be worn over masks?
Yes, they can be worn over masks, but you have to have a mask on. Yes, you can wear those over.
Who will run the chain gangs?
Same process for that as in years past. That will be up to the host school to make that determination. They are part of the officiating crew, so they need to follow same guidelines as far as social distancing, as far as mask wearing and that sort of thing.
Yeah, but usually those are run by parents. So do those count against our 60 allowed on the sideline?
Those are event personnel. So event personnel are not part of your team personnel. That's part of the officiating crew.
And then can they use a mouthpiece similar to an Invisalign type?
Per NFHS rules, they have to have a mouth guard. That's the answer to that. Any mouth guard that is providing safety to the teeth and mouth area.
And then are players' masks restricted from logos, writing, or other images?
So, school logos, things like that are fine on the masks. We would, of course, just not allow for any sort of slogans or inappropriate language on those masks, similar to, we wouldn't want that information or anything like that on a helmet. So just make sure that whatever is placed on that mask is tasteful and appropriate for education-based athletics.
Okay, and I believe that's it for this slide.
All right, so going back to sideline personnel and in particular the team box. So this year the team box will be extended on both sides to the 10-yard line. That of course is to provide more area for social distancing to take place. We will require that 6 feet of social distancing while your athletes and staff are on the sideline. Another change with that, all coaches must remain in the team box unless there is a timeout or an authorized conference. So with that, coaches, you can't be out in that restricted area at any time. You always need to be in the team box. And again, that's to ensure social distancing practices. Obviously for your staff, your kids, while you're on the sideline within the team box, no sharing of helmets, other equipment, water bottles, towels, anything like that. Provide sanitizer on the sideline, make that available for your team personnel. And as we mentioned earlier, there's a maximum of 60 individuals within the team box. How you break that out is up to you, knowing that can only be players, coaches, managers, athletic trainers, whoever is actually part of the team who has a role that is part of team personnel. So if you have, if that's going to be 55 players and 5 coaches, that's up to you on how you determine that. But it is a maximum of 60 individuals, and we encourage you to make sure that those folks are always social distance when they're not engaged in activity.
Nothing in the chat.
For timeouts and authorized conferences, one single timeout for each team can be extended to 2 minutes for hydration or if you need sanitization of equipment, that sort of thing. Also for authorized conferences, those should take place now between the 9-yard marks instead of on the sideline. And again, that's for social distancing purposes. One thing from the NFHS with that, as you know, currently you cannot take technology out with you between the 9-yard marks. You can't take an iPod out or an iPad out there and show plays or show information to your quarterback. However, due to this new modification for COVID-19, you can take technology out there for those conferences taking place between the 9-yard marks. Also, as we talked about a little bit earlier, intermissions or the time between the first and second and third and fourth periods, time after scores or tries, prior to free kicks, you can extend those as you feel is best for the nature of the game. If there needs to be some sanitization or hydration for the kids, whatever it may be, we will be flexible with those time limits that are usually pretty strictly enforced for intermissions between those various periods within the game.
And Dusty, there's a question from a previous slide. Are officials the ones who are responsible for counting the individuals in the team box?
No, that is the team needs to take care of that on their own. But again, we're education-based athletics and integrity and respect and competing with class. We hope that our coaches will take care of that and ensure that there's only 60 individuals on the sideline. And I know there'll be a lot of film out there. If we happen to find out that schools are violating that policy, then of course we will address it from our end.
And that's it.
And then a few others before we move into our normal football bylaws and regulations. Any pregame or postgame handshakes between the teams and officials and coaches and whatnot, you need to suspend those for this unique year. All game officials and other administrative personnel, as we talked about, whether that's the line of game crew, ball handlers, clock operators, maintain social distancing throughout the entire contest. And also those folks, as we keep preaching, they have to have face coverings as well. For officials, as I'm sure Dana has talked a little bit about in the past, you can use electronic whistles or anything that can be worn under your face covering. And lastly, gloves are not required, so it's just normal NFHS rules with that. Gloves can be worn by your student athletes, but just as in any normal year, they have to meet either the NOCSI or the SFIA standards per NFHS rules.
Okay, there's a couple more questions. Do end zone camera personnel count as 60?
So there are 60 individuals allowed in the team box. So any team personnel within the team box, that is correct.
And then again, film personnel, how are they counted toward capacity of stadium, team or essential?
So that's something that you'll need to work with the host side on, as far as who is allowed in and out of the facility. If you need someone to run the camera, obviously that's someone that's going to be away from the team box itself and in an area away from other individuals. But again, check with the facility prior to going to play that specific contest.
And a follow-up.
And then let me answer this, guys. We're having a lot of like who's part of the 60 and who this and who that. Guys, the idea is 6 foot social distancing. We're extending the sideline. We don't need to have parents and all these extra cameras now, because we need to get parents in the games and everything else like that. If you are bringing people for the camera, that is towards your 60 people that are allowed. So just because they're not between the 10 and 10, you need to make sure you're counting those. Now, if it's somebody that's streaming the game, that's really not part of your team, that's part of the athletic director setting that up, then those don't count. But anybody you're bringing as managers, camera people, anybody, those are essential personnel for you. Those are people for your team. Those will count towards the 60.
There are no other questions in the chat at this time.
All right, and moving on to now more specific to NMAA bylaws that we would have in a normal year. I'll try and move through this quickly. We still have to go through the NFHS rules and points of emphasis and whatnot. Practice regulations, this is something that has been updated recently because of the unique school year and condensed season. And what I'm going to go over first is what a school would have to go through if they are starting fresh on the first official day of practice. So we'll say you have not been using helmets and shoulder pads during your pod workouts. You have to start with 2 days of helmets only, then 2 days of helmets and shoulder pads only, and then 2 days of full contact, maximum of 30 minutes per player per day allowed. But on that note, if the school has already been using helmets and shoulder pads during the off-season workouts, that first 4-day acclimation period can be waived, and you can start those full pads and full contact immediately. So if you are a school in that situation, you've been working with those helmets and shoulder pads during off-season workouts, come February 22nd, if you're one of those schools that can start at that time, you can start full contact and full pads. And if you're in that situation, you're allowed 120 minutes of full contact for that week, but still a maximum of 30 minutes per player per day. And then once we start week 2 through the end of the season, it would be a maximum of 90 minutes of full contact, and same thing, still a maximum 30 minutes per player per day. And the one change that our board of directors just passed today, actually, it used to be where each school or athlete had to participate in 8 days of practice prior to participating in a scrimmage, and then 10 days of practice prior to competing in a game. However, due to this shortened condensed season, we won't have scrimmages. So it has been a change that a school or an athlete has to have 8 days of practice prior to competing in a game. So 8 days of practice prior to competing in a game. And then, as always, just some important definitions. Full contact football drills or live game simulations where live action occurs. And live action is contact at game speed, where players execute full tackles at a competitive pace, taking players to the ground. Our competition period and game limitations, that's the same that we have had in the past. A student shall not accumulate more than 8 football experiences within a 5-day period. And a football experience is defined as participating in more than one play on offense during a quarter, and then more than one play on defense during a quarter. And note that special teams do not count towards participation limits or football experiences. The one thing I have had this question come up, that 5-day period is, if you played on a Monday, that 5-day period is Monday through Friday. So if we do have to make some unique scheduling opportunities for certain schools, you can stay within this rule and play on a Monday and a Saturday. Coach education requirements. As you know, we've required the USA Football Heads Up certification for a number of years now. It's the responsibility of the school to ensure that all coaches, mid-school, high school, assistant, head coaches, go through this certification. It's current for 4 years from the date of completion. There are 4 courses required on the NFHS Learn website to get that certification. One is the concussion course that all coaches have to go through every year anyway. Another is a heat illness course. The third one is sudden cardiac arrest. And the last one is from USA Football, and that's the tackling and blocking course that is available also through the NFHS site. There are 2 new courses that were required per our board of directors back in the fall. Those are available also on the NFHS Learn site. One is protecting students from abuse. The other is bullying, hazing, and inappropriate behaviors. And those courses must be taken not on a yearly basis, but every other year. Same concussion requirements we've been utilizing in the last few years that have been implemented by the state of New Mexico. There's a concussion in sports fact sheet for our coaches, athletes, and parents. That's a yearly requirement. Also, student athletes have to go through the concussion for students course on the NFHS website. Our mercy rule still will be in effect for this year. For 8-man through 6A, it's the running clock will go into effect when a team is up by 35 points, and then the game will be ended if a team is up by 50 points at halftime or at any point in the second half. For 6-man, it's a little different. The running clock will go into effect when a team is up by 35 points at any time during the second half. And then same rules, game will end when a team is up by 50 points at halftime or at any point in the second half. These rules apply to sub-varsity as well. This comes up a few times. We get questions from officials and coaches. Some of our football stadiums across the state do have electronic play clocks. Per NFHS rules, an electronic or a field level 25-second clock can be used if the host school has the technology and staff available to effectively operate the system. Game officials can opt to keep this clock on the field if it is determined that the clock is malfunctioning or operating inconsistently. And note that this is not a requirement for schools. It's just an option available for member schools if they do want to have that actual play clock on field level. And that is all I have for our NMAA football bylaws that we utilize on a yearly basis. Do we have any questions before we move on to the rules question portion?
There's nothing in the chat, Dusty. I don't know if anybody wants to unmute to ask. Or maybe there aren't any questions.
All right, well, thank you all. At this time, I will turn it over to Jack Jones. He is a former NMAA official and group leader for the sport of football. And he has served as our NFHS rules presenter the last few years, both for officials and coaches. We appreciate Jack very much. He's been very helpful with this clinic for years, and also with rules interpretations and whatnot on a seasonal basis. So Jack, at this time, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Dusty. I appreciate the opportunity to do this again. And there are not a lot of new rules this year on 2020, but been so long since 2019, the new rules, and we will be doing a short review of that also. The first one here is sometimes we make a rule put it in a book for something we've been doing for a long time. The coach designates somebody or himself to relay the penalty options to the linesman or the line judge to get that to the referee. That has to be designated before the game starts. It cannot be changed during the game. So if the head coach designates an assistant coach and he didn't like one of the decisions he made, he can't change him unless there's an emergency or something like that. And then it can be. But the linesman people need to make sure they get this relayed to the head coach, the proper options, and then the linesman or line judge relays it to the referee for enforcement of the penalty. Really something we've been doing all along, but now it's in the rule book. Okay. This is a good change. That's we've had stuff with the lightning delays and all of this, and it's caused all kinds of problems. This is a new option. In the last 3 minutes of the second quarter, if we have a weather delay that lasts for 30 minutes or longer, in the past, we had to come back and use a 15-minute halftime and a 3-minute warm-up period. With agreement of both coaches now, we can come back after the 30 minutes, play the last 3 minutes of the second quarter. We still have to have a halftime, but it can be shortened to 1 minute plus the 3-minute warm-up period and go from there. This eliminates having maybe a 30-minute weather delay, coming back and playing for 3 or 4 minutes, and then going to another 15 minutes. So this is an option that can be taken. It has to be within the last 3 minutes. 30-minute weather delay. Mutually, both coaches agree we can shorten it down anytime. It could be 5 minutes, but it can be shortened down to 1 minute and a 3-minute warm-up period, and then start the third quarter. Good change. I've seen those where we have a long delay and then have to go to a 20-minute halftime sometime. Sometimes you run about 8 plays in an hour and 15 minutes, and this will stop that. Okay, 40-second play clock. When this first came in 2 years ago, when we were talking at the state clinic, and we've all watched this on TV for a while, when somebody is trying to get it going and then the player goes down and is hurt. In the past, that was an official's timeout, and then the clock would be set at 25. Now, if there's a defensive player injury, a defensive player equipment causing an official's timeout, the play clock will be set to 40 seconds, not the 25. This is a way that somebody could fake an injury and cut 15 seconds off the running clock. So good change. I remember when this came up a year ago, somebody asked me how we were going to handle that. And I said, well, they hadn't handled it very well at the college level yet. Let's wait and see how this goes and we'll take care of it. So we have that will reset to 40-second shot clock. Shot clock here, that's what I've been doing. Get play clock, and then we run it down for 40 seconds and they have to run the play within the 40. It is not a 25-second reset. Clarification, and this is a strange one, but I'll go. When either team is awarded a new series after a legal kick, the play clock is set to 25 seconds and starts with the ready for play. Well, most of the time you have a kick, there's going to be a new series. So it would be at 25. The one time I can think this happened, if you decide to kick a field goal on third down, it's blocked, it's behind the line, the kicking team gets it. Now it's fourth down, that's going to be a 40-second. So anytime there's a legal kick, and there will be a new series for either K or R, the play clock will be set to 25 seconds. It's change that just had to be put in the rules, and because it just happened. Disconcerting act fouls and penalties reclassified. Good change. Defensive teams barking out signals to confuse the offense, feinting or going around, and this is an act or verbally. In the past, it was an unsportsmanlike penalty, 15 yards, very severe, and it wasn't being called. So what they've done is change it to a 5-yard penalty. Hopefully they can get this taken care of. It is not as severe, and the officials will be a little more apt to call this foul. Okay, the good one, spiking the ball to conserve time. Did go into the rules a few years ago, like was on TV all the time. The quarterback could, to conserve time, we spike the ball forward, causing the ball to be dead, the clock stopping. but we didn't have a provision for it in shotgun formation. It had to be somebody under the center to receive the snap. Now it can be in shotgun formation, has to throw it forward. Big deal, clean catch, no muff. Right straight to the hands and caught and spiked to the ground immediately. That's the only way it can count. If it's muffed, bobbled, hits the ground and then caught by the quarterback and throws to the ground, illegal forward pass, intentional grounding. Has to be a clean catch and cannot hit the ground before it hits the hands. Okay, anytime, and I just want to talk about the editorial changes here. Anytime you change one rule, one word in one rule, it usually affects about 7 different rules. And I didn't put that slide up there because all it is clerical and doesn't really mean much to what we're doing. Okay, correcting play clock errors. Official gets it set wrong between the 25 and the 40. If they realize it while the clock is counting down, it can be corrected and started. We cannot see that we made an error after the ball has been snapped and go back and play the down over. There is no playing a let. It has to be realized in that period, messed up, change it, start it over again, go to 40 or go to 25 and take off. Has to be in that time. Once the ball's been snapped, that cannot be corrected. Okay, you can't talk about new rules without talking about legal jerseys. 2024 is when the change happens. Both of these jerseys on this contrast, the number contrasts with the jersey, really good on that one. That's legal now and will be legal in 2024. Here we have 3 jerseys. All are legal now and all will be legal in 2024 because there's enough contrast between the body of the jersey and the main color of the number. Here are the ones that will be illegal in 2024. The first one, number 25, the Cardinals, because the main color of the number is the same color as the jersey, illegal starting in 2024. Vipers, number 84, not enough contrast between the grays of the body of the jersey and the number, illegal 2024. Panthers, number 36, fade numbers. This is a lot, when sublimation came around, this started and it didn't cost that much more, but it made it very hard to distinguish the number by officials and also for coaches when they were doing scouting. Same in the Cardinals, number 24, you can see it's a darker gray on the top, fading to white on the bottom. These are legal now, but will be illegal starting in the 2024 season. Tripping. A lot of people didn't know this, but up until now, you could trip the ball carrier. The rule only did it for, tripping a lead blocker or something like that. Now, if you trip the ball carrier, it is also a penalty. Penalty is 15 yards. 20 points of emphasis. Sportsmanship, intentional grounding that I want to talk about a lot about in a minute, and then the ineligible downfield and line of scrimmage formations. The first one, sportsmanship, doesn't just have to do with the players and coaches and stuff on the sideline. We have things with PA, we have the band, we have some fans. These are not for the official to rule on, but it needs to be taken care of. And it's actually mentioned in this that it needs to be taken care of by game administration and school administration. And if there is a problem with this, the officials need to bring this to the attention to the NMAA office. Intentional grounding, the most misunderstood rule in high school football, because we watch TV all weekend. We do not have a tackle box that if the quarterback runs out, he can do anything and throw it anywhere as long as it goes beyond the line of scrimmage. That's only on TV. We need to call intentional grounding. Usually it happens when the play sort of gets disrupted. He does go out, he knows he's going to get sacked, and he just throws it to get rid of it and throws it downfield. Both of these slides you can see. In slide A, he goes, scrambles to the right, stops, comes back and just throws it away. Nobody in the area. Intentional grounding needs to be called. In B, runs out, sprints out, nobody open, getting ready to get sacked, throws it downfield, nobody in the area. Intentional grounding. He's out of the tackle box, which means nothing in high school. The ball goes beyond the line of scrimmage, which means nothing in high school. This is intentional grounding and is supposed to be called.
Jack, is in the area objective or subjective?
Is that a question?
Yes.
Okay. There's a question that comes about in the area. Just about everything we do as an official is subjective and not objective. If they're scrambling and trying to avoid it and throwing it downfield, get it called. You know, the other times when they get the ball and they're reading the route of the receiver and they throw it immediately, they're not scrambling. The receiver cuts inside and you throw it outside. That's not what grounding is. Grounding is trying to keep from a loss of yardage and getting sacked. Throwing to an area where no receiver is just because the quarterback misread what the receiver was going to do is not intentional grounding. Okay.
And Jack, does that
Yeah.
include throwing out of bounds?
What's that?
Does that include throwing out of bounds?
Yes. Okay. Ineligible downfield. In the last few years, when I've gone and looked at several game films, it is amazing how many times an ineligible receiver being called downfield is not a foul the way it happened, and how many times there is an ineligible receiver downfield that is not called. You have the 2-yard expanded zone where the offensive lineman can block. He is past the line of scrimmage, but that 2 yards is allowed. And if he's going to be downfield, it has to be at the moment of the pass. If you get these where they're scrambling and throw from one side of the field to the other to a receiver, the ball's in the air for 5 or 6, 7 seconds sometimes. And then you notice the receiver, the blocker downfield, that's when the ones I've seen called. But it is at the moment of the pass. If they are in that 2-yard belt at the moment the pass, but by the time the receiver catches it, they're 5, 6 yards downfield, that is not a penalty. Line of scrimmage formation. Okay, to be on the line, a lineman must have his helmet breaking the waistline of the center. The guard and the tackle there both fit that. Number 88 is not in either a back. He has to have that helmet behind the nearest lineman. And he must have it in breaking the center's waistline to be on the line. In this case, he is neither. He's in no man's land. This is a foul at the snap for illegal formation. Okay, reset the play clock. In 2019, when we were doing this, we did not have a mechanics book here for the officials to give signals. What we have, if we have one hand going up by the referee, that means the clock is going to be set at 25 seconds. If we use both hands, the play clock will be set at 40 seconds. This is what we said 2 years ago because there was no mechanics book. It was put in, and this signal just came down from the levels above. A little bit on 2019 formation. If you remember, and now it's been 18 months since we've talked about this. And most of the time when we're doing stuff all the time, we get used to it. We're not used to new rules, but we also are not used to new rules that were just a year old because it's not habit yet. You can now have only 5 men on the line. They have to be numbered 50 through 79, but you can still not have over 4 backs. This happens a lot when we get into punt formation and stuff like that. And on punts is when a lot of injuries take place. This made us re-kick a lot of times because of the illegal formation. That's going to stop that. So right there in that slide, 1, 2, 3, 6, you got 10 people on the field. You can have 5 on the line, but you can't have more than 4 backs. Right here, you see number 84 is in the backfield, 15, 5, and 31. Legal formation 4, even though there is only 6 on the line. There's 10 players on the field. They meet the requirements. All the interior linemen are numbered 50 through 79. They meet that requirement. and there's at least 5 on the line and no more than 4 in the backfield. New rule last year about illegal kicking and batting. The only thing that changed, it went from 15 yards to 10 yards. And the only reason I put this in there, it probably didn't happen to a lot of people the entire year. And we've already forgotten it was a new rule. Okay, illegal horse collar last year, or 19, went in where it was put in where you grab the jersey. It used to be grabbing the shoulder pad, inside the pad and pulling somebody down. Now it's also the back of the jersey. You do have to pull the opponent to the ground for it to be a horse tackle. So now it could be the inside of the shoulder pad or just grabbing the jersey. (2019) points of emphasis, and I bring this up just about every year about the free blocking zone. Anytime there are safety factor rules, they need to be adhered to and they need to be officiated by the crew. The free blocking zone, as well, no, it's 8 yards wide, 6 yards deep, 3 on either side of the ball. Anybody that starts in that zone can block anybody on the defense that was in that zone at the snap below the waist. If you look at A, B5 is outside of the zone. As we go over to B on it, he's being blocked by A4. In the zone, A4 was in the zone, but B5 started the snap outside of the zone. If A4 blocks him below the waist, it is illegal. I think I read that right. Yes. Okay. Here we go. Same formation. B5 outside of the zone. A3 outside the zone. Wherever he blocks him, if A3 blocks B5 below the waist, that is illegal. Same situation here. B1 is in the zone. A3 is outside the zone. Pretty much contacts him right on the edge. But A3 was not in the free blocking zone at the time of the snap. Cannot block B1 below the waist. Okay, this one's the one that gets confusing a lot. If A6 in A fires out and then just starts pass blocking right there on B4, that would be legal. What happens in A, he retreats, does not initially block the B4, retreats and then pass blocks, has to block him above the waist. You'll notice in B there, he is charging out immediately and blocking B4. That play would be legal to block him below the waist. Here we have a thing, this is also for the defense. B4 goes up and his defensive assignment is to take out the lead blocker. If they were not in the free blocking zone stuff, the defensive player has the same regulations as the offensive player. He cannot take the lead blocker out below the waist. That was it. That's a short review on last year's. Remember, and I always talk when I have pre-games with officials, we spend a lot of time going over the new rules, but the rules that were new in the previous year have not become habit, and they need to be, all pre-games include those years that are, those rules that are not habit yet. Sometimes we just talk about the new ones and take for granted. We forgot all about the one that was new last year, and this year that's been 16, 18 months. We haven't talked about that. So get that stuff taken care of in the pre-games by the officials, and coaches remember what the ones that were new 2 years ago. I would just like to say one thing. I listened to this for the talking about all of these new stuff with the COVID, and there's a lot of things on people's mind. And I'm just going to say this. I went through October and November doing Zoom meetings once a week with all of the stuff we were going to have to do for basketball. And you listen and you listen and you listen and you do it just like they say. But it's almost like when you get to that first game, and now I've been doing 6 weeks of it, a little longer, it really feels good So all of a sudden that ball being kicked off and a little bit of normalcy comes back to your life. Because all you've been talking about this and you get the COVID stuff taken care of, and then we're going to kick it off. And then you'll feel a little bit of normalcy coming back into your life. I know I did, starting at the 1st of December. So Dusty, thank you for letting me doing this again. I appreciate it and always do.
Jack, thank you. We appreciate you. It's been great having you the last few years for this rules clinic. I know the coaches and the officials both appreciate you as well. Do we have any final questions before we conclude the football rules clinic?
Yeah, just a quick point of clarification, Mr. Jones, because this comes up frequently for us. Defenders have the same restrictions when it comes to cutting as an offensive player. So where we see it a lot is with pullers getting cut down. If it's not their first move off the snap of the ball, am I interpreting this correctly? They cannot cut down a lead blocker. They cannot cut down a puller because it's impossible to do that on a puller because it's not going to be your first move off the snap of the ball. Or am I missing something?
That is correct. And that was one of the things they showed. But the deal is to be a legal block in the free blocking zone, it has to be on the initial charge by the offensive lineman. If you have a pulling guard or sweep of anything, if the defensive back is going to come up and his job is to take somebody out, he does have the same restrictions. He cannot take out the lead blocker below the waist. And that's missed a lot. You are correct.
All right. Well, again, thank you to all of our football coaches. Like I said at the start of this meeting, really appreciate all that you've done throughout the last 11 months for our kids and for our office, and also to our officials. I know we have not had competitions out there for you in all of our sports, but I know you've stayed engaged via the numerous webinars and trainings that the Officials Association has offered. And we know that you've still been working hard, even though we haven't had those games for you guys to call, but you are much appreciated by the NMAA and our staff. And we are excited for a 2021 spring semester football season. And like I said at the start of this, we've gone through a lot of bumps and hurdles along the way, but we're finally here. It doesn't mean this upcoming season is going to be easy, but we will get through it, and we'll keep fighting, and we'll do what's best for kids. And like I said to start the meeting, I'm excited we're here. We're finally here. There's light at the end of the tunnel, and we will be playing some football games here in a few weeks. I will go ahead and send out the recording of this clinic to anybody that is interested. I'll see if we can also post it on the website just so it's available there as well. But if you have any questions related to any of this information, please don't hesitate to reach out to me via email or by phone. And good luck this year. We're excited to be here, and we look forward to, although it may be a condensed season, a very successful football season. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.